will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down.
Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, another week in lockdown. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dan. Another week of sunshine, at least, although the weather forecast coming up is not so good. It may make it easier to stay indoors.
Indeed. Well, thanks for putting it down on that. We're also joined, I'm happy to say, on the podcast by Harry Fone, the grassroots campaign manager of the Taxpayers Alliance. Harry, welcome to the podcast. How are things with you and how are you coping with the lockdown?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Yeah, well, I've got a barbecue hopefully this evening, so lovely sunny weather down here in Kent, so can't complain. I haven't been furloughed or anything like that, so yeah, not too bad, thankfully.
Good to hear, good to hear. So, Mike, what have we got to discuss on the podcast today?
So, talking again about COVID-19, the exit strategy and policy ideas for it, a Taxpayers Alliance and the Town Hall Rich List, so giving a bit of a review of that. A feature of the BBC that we were due to discuss at this time. Harry was due to talk at that, so we're going to quickly go over some of that. Have a chat with Harry and talk about his role and some of the things he's done in the past. And as always, some more ideas to stay busy.
Excellent. Well, of course, sadly, we have to continually talk about COVID-19. We're all still in lockdown. But we appear, hopefully, fingers crossed, to have gone past the peak, as it were. The curve appears to have been flattened. So we're really now looking at what the exit strategies might be when we might get some form of release from lockdown, even if it's only partial, and when those that might occur. I've seen that there have been some suggestions from companies that they are going to start to go back to work. In particular, Taylor Wimpey is going to reopen some sites, and I think Jaguar and Aston Martin are looking to go back and reopen their factories. Mike, I think you were on Sputnik Radio with some ideas recently. Are we going to get out of this soon?
Who knows if we're going to get this out this soon? I'm not entirely confident of that. Indeed, on Sputnik, good to speak to them again. Mainly, they were talking about PPE and the situation with the government. I actually think the country's coped remarkably well, making sure that there was enough equipment and this PPE stuff and ventilators and hospital beds. Given the entire world wanted a product at once, the fact that we kept a maintenance of it, and there's been scare stories of shortages, but I'm not sure there's actually been any shortages. I think that's been quite a remarkable thing. You mentioned companies coming out of lockdown. Obviously, we've got a couple of articles up on the website, one from myself and another, saying how we might want to come out of it and things we want to do. Certainly to Sputnik, I made the point we need to think about lowering tax rates if we want to increase our income to actually pay off the debt, and that's going to be the key way to drive the economy going forward. Just on the lockdown, I think we've already come out of it, but only on a Thursday evening on Westminster Bridge, if my pictures are true.
Well, yeah, we have seen those scenes once again. Harry, firstly, how are you coping with it all? How are the TPA coping with it all? And I believe that the TPA have come up with some policy suggestions of their own.
Yeah, no, we're all coping fairly well. Thankfully, a lot of what we do, because a lot of it is research based, many people can do that from home. What we are really missing out on, though, is that ability to go and do the grassroots campaigning that I have the fortune of being in charge of. And usually this sort of time of year we'd be in Croydon High Street in lovely sunny weather, handing out leaflets, banging the gong for lower taxes and accountability in local government. But yeah, sadly, I mean, as you say, who knows when we'll be going back to that. But in terms of coronavirus itself, we put out a statement as well as a briefing note on some policy recommendations. Specifically with coronavirus, we put forward 3 policy recommendations. Divert the aid budget to fighting coronavirus. So we send about £15 billion every year on overseas development assistance. So where that spending is isn't being used for humanitarian purposes, I think it's fair to say we could divert a lot of that money to tackling the problem here at home. Secondly, we've called for a freeze on council tax and focusing, what money councils do have on health and social care services. I mean, specifically on the freezing point, council tax is now £1,817 for a Band D bill on average in England now, and that is quite, it's £150 every month. It's a huge strain on people's finances. So planned rises should be frozen, basically. Third one, suspend Sunday trading restrictions. We're seeing these longer and longer queues now at supermarkets, although they have eased in recent weeks. But it seems to me if you can let supermarkets open for longer, it gives an opportunity to remove bottlenecks or limit the number of bottlenecks that there are. Also gives staff a chance to restock more easily. So we're hoping the government will take heed of our suggestions.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think we've seen a number of regulations that have been removed, albeit temporarily, to allow business to work through this whole situation. It might be an idea to not actually bring them all back in once we're actually out of this, because ultimately we've borrowed a lot of money, or we will have to pay. We'll have to pay for all of this. Perhaps understandably, we had to do something, but how we're going to pay it back? Well, ultimately, it's businesses and that actually generate that wealth, and that actually then pay the taxes or employ people that pay the taxes. So I think a bit of deregulation would be the way to go. But you can just imagine that there's some people out there who are quite happy with this collectivism that's occurred at the moment, and perhaps wouldn't agree with us. So I think we've got a bit of a fight on our hands, but I think we've definitely got the right ideas there from the Taxpayers Alliance. Okay, so speaking of the Taxpayers Alliance, there we've obviously published that they've published rather the Town Hall Rich List recently, and in our last podcast, Mike and I, we discussed some of the lowlights from Croydon, in particular the fact that there are now 23 people earning more than £100,000 a year working for Croydon Council, and with some earning more than the Prime Minister. Full details are on an article on our website. But hey, it's the Taxpayers Alliance that produced this Rich List. So Harry, can you tell us a little bit about the background to this the Rich List, and perhaps let our listeners know some of the more egregious examples nationwide?
Yeah, certainly. So this is the 13th edition of the Town Hall Rich List, and it's a compilation of all council employees in the country who receive remuneration in excess of £100,000. So this is all collated from Council's Statement of Accounts. It's a very large undertaking, but we've been doing it for many years now, as I say, so we've gotten quite good at it. The key highlights from this year was there were 2,667 council employees who received pay in excess of £100,000. So just to clarify, pay in this case is made up of salary, pensions, compensation for loss of office, bonuses, expenses, things like that. Now, that 667 employees is 226 more than there were last year, and it's the highest number since 2013-14. Of those 2,667, 667 were paid more than £100,000. And I think our top earner this year was a lady in North Lanarkshire who got something like £615,000 as part of a loss of office compensation and a pension contribution, which is quite frankly staggering. Specifically with Croydon, I think you've had an increase, haven't you? You had 19 people last year being paid more than 100,000. Now you're at 23, I believe.
Absolutely, so up again, up by 4. At a time when the council has constantly complained about how hard it is for it to find any money.
Yeah, so you got Jo Negrini, is that her name? Chief Executive's on. She got £217,000 for 2018-19.
Yep, absolutely. We've then got the executive director of health, wellbeing and adults, Guy Van Diechu, on 215,000, and a surprisingly large number of undisclosed people, including one on over £200,000. Now, quite how you can and I understand how some of the people at the bottom might be undisclosed, earning just over 100 grand, but quite how you can be on over 200 grand and nobody know who you are seems quite shocking to me.
I mean, there's an interesting. So one of the questions I'm asked a lot is, are they worth this? Are they worth this large amount of money? And my answer is, potentially. I mean, if they are delivering the best council services possible, they have eradicated all wasteful spending down to the last penny. All the potholes are being filled. The health and social care is, the best there can be. I don't have an issue with it, but you speak to, when we find this all the time when we're in Croydon, don't we? You speak to people, they are not happy with the council services they're being provided. They're seeing their council tax go up every year, and they're getting, lower quality and fewer services.
No, absolutely, and this is, I mean, in Croydon, the council, and to what extent it's the executives and what extent it's the councillors, and or circumstance, it's hard to say, but we haven't had a new shopping centre delivered here that was meant to happen, and now it's basically stopped. We've had loads of problems with bin collection. We've had loads of problems with roads. We spend a huge amount of money on culture, and no one's quite sure where it goes. There's lots of problems, and it's you're paying people premium salaries to not deliver. What's really struck me about this as well, we've done some comparisons around London and around us. The London Borough of Barnet is the most comparable borough in London with Croydon. It's often used. They make do with just 7 staff and over 100 grand. So it clearly is possible. And look at our neighbouring boroughs. Sutton has just 11, Merton 9. To the south, there's slightly different boroughs, but Tandridge has just 1, Reigate and Banstead 4. That's a huge difference from the 23 Croydon seems to think it needs.
I mean, so yeah, and that's a very good point. Now, Wandsworth is another interesting example, actually, because they, similar to Croydon, I think they've got about 18 people, maybe 19, who are on more than 100 grand, but they are actually an incredibly efficient council. They constantly rank near the top of the rankings that are available, and what they also do as well, I believe they share a lot of their staff with other councils, and as a means of keeping costs down. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have more people earning over £100,000, it's a bad thing. But as you say, when you compare Croydon and Barnet, there is a major discrepancy there, and taxpayers should rightly be asking questions about why they are not getting what they are paying for.
I can assure you, we are asking those questions, and as you say, Harry, when in better times we've been out on the out at street stalls, and the people of Croydon are not very happy with the services that they're getting from Croydon Council. So it's it's disappointing to see that we're perhaps not getting such value for money. Obviously, you work for the Taxpayers Alliance, and you're involved in this, looking at these things. Mike referenced the number of people who are undisclosed, but nonetheless earning significant sums of money. Is there any reason for that, and is there any way that we could find out what they're doing?
Good question. I mean, no, it's not easy to find out what they're doing, and I have serious concerns about why some of these positions are undisclosed. I believe that not even a freedom of information request would necessarily reveal this information. And it's in the old days when we first started doing town hall riches, it all had to be done via freedom of information request. This stuff was not published in council accounts, and it was in their statement of accounts, and it was thanks to our work that this is now sort of commonplace that they have to do this. That said, there is no sort of set way they have to do it, and in fact some councils are deliberately trying to obfuscate the data, so I think almost to make it harder for us. But I think there should be some directive from government to say, no, you should disclose what's going on here. You must, make it law, because we as taxpayers, I think we have a fundamental right to know.
it does feel, even if some positions you don't disclose, and I sympathise slightly with the idea you might not name every name, but the department, the sort of role it is, something
Yeah.
other than just a blanket no data doesn't feel, should be the right approach to it. Let's hope that works for the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Maybe something to for the Taxpayers Alliance to look into.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we're always trying to unearth as much as we can about what's going on at our local councils. We send out thousands of freedom of information requests every year. And now I'm not doing so much of my grassroots campaigning. I've been firing a load off as well. So hopefully more on that to come in future.
Good. Let's certainly hope so. Now, this past week was when we were supposed to be having our forum on the future of the BBC, but unfortunately, of course, we had to postpone it due to the coronavirus. But Mike and I did discuss some of the issues around partiality or otherwise of the BBC on our recent pubcast. Available at all good podcasting sites. Now, Harry, you were due to speak at that event, but hopefully, obviously, it got postponed, and hopefully you'll be able to speak at a rearranged event that we're looking to sort out for the autumn. The Taxpayers Alliance has been running an Axe the Tax campaign to scrap the TV licence fee, the BBC licence fee. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the campaign and how they could potentially get involved?
Yeah, certainly. I was really looking forward to that event, and I hope, as you say, we can reschedule it, because this is something that is becoming more and more. It's a debate we need to have about the future of the BBC. So yeah, we've launched the tax campaign this year. We just feel that the license fee is no longer fit for purpose. That's not to say that the BBC doesn't put out some good content. It does. But I don't think, and we don't think, you should have to be forced to pay for it simply for owning a television. It's the 21st century. We have all these alternatives: Netflix, Amazon, even BBC and ITV are now doing their BritBox service. So the first thing we've done with the campaign, and it does seem that the government are also keen to make this happen, which is very much in our favour. The first thing we've done is the government's doing an investigation, if you like, into the decriminalisation of the TV licence fee, which many of our supporters were able to take part in that consultation, and we got lots of submissions to that. So that's the first step in this battle to bring about the end of the licence fee, because it seems to me quite ridiculous that, if you don't pay the license fee, you're going to a magistrate's court. I believe 1 in 10 magistrates cases are for license fee non-payment, and it particularly targets single mothers, I believe, as well, which seems quite unfair. Again, just for owning a television, £157.50 for that sort of money, you can get almost a Netflix and an Amazon subscription. And it's not like I'm a sports fan. The BBC doesn't have too much that I want to watch. I want to watch my sports, and BBC doesn't have Test match cricket or Premier League football anymore, or Champions League. So it needs to adapt. The license fee needs to go. And if the BBC maintains its programming is so brilliant, they shouldn't have a problem being opened up to competitive markets.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're just getting money out of us with menaces, basically. As you say, at the moment there's technically the threat of criminalization, whereas Netflix is cheaper and Amazon Prime is cheaper, and I think perhaps younger people as well are used to paying for a subscription that they choose to take out, whereas of course we're lumbered with having to pay whether we want to or not.
Yeah, I mean, there is a case. I could argue that if the BBC was, a really stripped down service, it just focused on news and some of that sort of soft power stuff that we see with the BBC World Service, this might not be an issue. I mean, if the license fee was only £40 a year, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. There would still be some correct questions about, is this fair? Should you have to pay for something that you don't necessarily want? That fact would still maintain, but I think that what I hear from a lot of people is that they believe that the BBC has a bias. Interesting, you always note that people on the left think the BBC has a right-wing bias. People on the right think it has a left-wing bias. But either way, people think it has a bias. They don't necessarily. I mean, it still is a trusted source of news, but there's a lot of people who don't feel it's that way anymore, and they would quite frankly like to see the back of it. I mean, we're not advocating that the BBC just goes away completely. We're just saying it has to change its funding model because on a personal level, I do think it has a role to fill, but I think they really need to stick to their original mandate.
No, see, there's something here as well. You say about the bias. It's really struck me when I speak to people these days how often there are people that watch the BBC and people that don't watch the BBC. They sort of sometimes split along Brexit lines and other political lines. But there's so much of the content that comes out of the BBC. Not only do I not watch because I just don't happen to watch that much telly, I deliberately wouldn't want to watch BBC content. I certainly don't feel I should be forced to pay for it.
So, Harry, how could people get involved in the campaign?
Yeah, so best thing to do is go onto our website, sign up to get our weekly bulletins if you're not doing so already, and that any things we do on the Axe the Tax campaign will come through into your email inbox. But also, let us know if you know of ways that the BBC are wasting money. Anything you think might be relevant. I mean, it's things like they've done in the past, like they often pay for taxis and chauffeur drivers rather than sending people on public transport, or they buy multiple copies of the same newspaper, when it's freely available online. Anything like that you think might be relevant, do let us know. I mean, I actually recently the BBC News changed its news graphics. And I know in the past, like their last logo change, and that was more than news, but their last logo change cost a fantastic amount of money. And so I was quite interested to know, well, how much did the news graphics cost to change? So I've sent off a Freedom of Information request. And the BBC News Department has an exemption, and they wouldn't tell me, which doesn't seem fair to me. So if you know of a wizard wheeze I can get around that, or if you know what the cost was, please tell me. I'd love to know.
Excellent. And what's the website address?
taxpayersalliance.com/axe_the_tax.
Excellent. Yeah, I would certainly encourage our listeners to sign up to your weekly bulletins. I think they arrive on a Sunday, if I recall correctly. Full of interesting news and ways you can get involved in the organisation. Mike.
So, Harry, thanks again for joining us. Fantastic to speak to you. Want to go through a few things, hopefully be of interest to our listeners. So, maybe if you could start by telling us a little bit about your role at the Taxpayers Alliance.
Yeah, well, I think I've possibly got the best role at the Taxpayers Alliance, although maybe I would say that. But the thing that makes the Taxpayers Alliance different from other campaign groups, say the Institute of Economic Affairs or the Adam Smith Institute, Centre for Policy Studies, etc., is that we do grassroots campaigning. We get out of Westminster, we go to all parts of the country. We've literally been to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, and everywhere in between. And so, as I say, normally we'd be in the town centre on a lovely sunny day like this, handing out leaflets on a particular issue. We've campaigned against stealth taxes such as clean air zones in the past. We've obviously been down to Croydon, looking at the way, handing out leaflets about the ways the council's wasted money. We sometimes do sort of PR stunts and things like that. But it's a fantastic role. You get to, interacting with the public is always fun, even when they disagree with you. What we do find, though, is many people are on our side, and many people don't know that their council or whoever in government is wasting their money, and they're quite shocked, and they all comes back to the point, well, I pay all this tax, and look where it's going. We're not getting what we pay for. So I've been doing it about 2.5 years now, and it's been tremendous fun, and I think things are, I'm pleased to say, going from strength to strength.
So that's great to hear. And so what first got you interested in tax policy then?
Well, I after coming out of university, I started my own business in IT, and you soon learn a lot about tax when you're having to try and do your tax return every year, or you soon realise how much tax you've got to pay at the end of the year. And I've always had a sort of libertarian leaning nature, and when you read in the newspapers or wherever about just how much money is being wasted at both a local and national level, it's annoying. And this idea advocated by many, both on the left and the right, and on the right worryingly so, that we need to raise taxes when the tax burden is already at a 50-year high. That deeply concerns me when all the evidence points to that if you bring the like we saw with corporation tax, like we saw with the top rate of income tax, when you brought the rate down, the revenue actually went up. And what's always sort of fascinated me is why no government has had the bravery, I guess, to say, look, we're going to put the rates down. If the revenue goes up, great. If it doesn't, we'll put it back. I mean, who could object to that?
Absolutely. And you mentioned your libertarian views there. So back in 2017 general election, you were in charge of the Libertarian Party's general election campaign. What were your main memories of that election?
Well, I mean, it was just tremendous fun. To be honest, before I hadn't done really any political campaigning before then. Partly being busy with my own business, but I was always of the mindset before the Brexit vote that nothing really could change in this country. And I was quite shocked when the country did vote for Brexit. So I thought, well, okay, things can change. I better go and put my money sort of where my mouth is, and let's go and do some campaigning. And I've been following the Libertarian Party because they were it's a very small party, but getting bigger by the day. But they're most sort of aligned to what I believe. Probably the next party would maybe be the Conservatives. I'm not sure. Hard to say these days. But So I was the nominating officer, and also sort of made myself campaign manager. But we had 4 candidates to stand in, all very unhelpfully in different parts of the country. One was in Portsmouth, the other was in Basingstoke, one was up in Newcastle, and the other in Hull. So very difficult to travel between them all. But we had an absolute laugh. I think we easily exceeded our expectations of what we were having. Standing 4 candidates in the first place was difficult. We got our deputy leader on the Daily Politics. That was his first ever interview he'd done on anything, and he was doing it live on national television for the BBC. But we just had so much fun, and it was everything from handing out leaflets, talking to people, fundraising. It really gave me the bug for it, and it was just great fun. And our candidates only got a few hundred votes, maybe 1,000 in total between them. But what really stuck with me actually, and I think maybe this is the key thing about it all, was okay. Yes, change doesn't happen overnight, but every single candidate said to me, I loved going into the ballot box and being able to vote for a candidate that I actually wanted to vote for, i.e. themselves. And that was that, and I think in a couple of cases, some of them paid their own deposits, and £500 a pop, and they lost those unfortunately because they didn't get 5% of the vote. But no, we had such a fun time, and I hopefully at some point I'll return to general election campaigning, because unfortunately the TPA doesn't get involved in elections because we are politically neutral.
Absolutely, I sympathise with them on the thought of losing your £500 deposit. So you mentioned the Libertarian Party there. Obviously, they're still in existence. Any thoughts on how they should be developing, or what they should be looking at next?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a fantastic opportunity on their hands, and in some ways, I wish I could have stayed a bit longer. But shortly after the election, the TPA advertised for the grassroots position. I thought I'm going to go for that, and the rest is history, as they say. I think they speak to a particularly young audience, particularly students, and that's something that a lot of parties struggle to really get on board. But I think you've been to the meetups they have in London. And I'm always amazed at the turnout. The turnout's huge in sometimes, and actually more often than not. And but it's always a young audience. And when you consider how low voter turnout is among students and youngsters, it's quite impressive that they are able to garner that. The only problem, dare I say it, with the younger sort of portion of the electorate is they don't have much money to give you, which is unfortunately what you need to win. But I think what they've got to do, they've got to try and build that base. I think they've got to do more to try and get themselves on radio, because theirs is an opinion that, and news for that matter, theirs is an opinion that isn't always necessarily heard, and I think it's one we should hear more of. And I think someone like Talk Radio, LBC, even local radio stations, I think they should be trying to do more to get on there and get the name out there. Any chance they have to stand at local elections where you don't have to pay a deposit, they should be doing, even if it's a paper candidate. Just getting the name on the ballot paper is is the first thing to do. But I think they stood a couple of candidates, maybe it was 4 or even 5 again actually at the recent election, which was again a tremendous achievement. They had a really good manifesto, very well presented and everything like that. So just more of the same, but it requires people, and this is the problem. Like everyone. Well, when I was there, everyone was a volunteer, and you've got to have dedicated people who really want to push this. But they can win local election seats. It doesn't take that much to win a council seat. Sometimes you only need, say, in some cases, 1,000 votes. Some cases, like a town council, you stand unopposed. So it needs more people to put themselves forward, more people to get involved, and then you can start to make small but significant changes in a local level, and then build it up hopefully nationally.
You say that about the town councils. That was very much a strategy of UKIP at one time, which is stand where you're unopposed. Once you get elected, you'll get re-elected, and that worked for obviously a number of years until up to the referendum. Earlier on, we discussed the AXA tax campaign. What other campaigns are the TPA focusing on now and for the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's all gone a little bit. Well, it's not completely up in the air, but yeah, well, it's going to be a weird year. I mean, I think coming out of coronavirus, we're going to have to look at how we rebuild the economy and try and keep any recession as small as it can be. And our views on that are very much you need to cut wasteful spending. I think HS2 should go on the scrap heap. Quite frankly, where we've got the situation where businesses have now seen how well their employees can work from home. In a lot of cases, you wonder what the demand for HS2 is going to be when it's eventually built in 2040 or whatever it now is. And so that's something we'll be keeping an eye on. We've also, alongside the Axe the Tax campaign, we've been running our Clean Up the State campaign, which is just looking at how one of the most notable examples we had recently was how the taxpayer is their money is being given to lobbying groups that then lobby the government to do a policy which the government doesn't believe in, which is quite ridiculous. So we're having a real look at some of the ways that taxpayers' money is being wasted at a sort of national level. So things like quangos. I mean, the amount of quangos we have are quite frankly ridiculous these days. But we'll still be pushing the case about council tax rises. I'll say it again. The average council tax bill in England is now £1,817, and that's just band D. I mean, imagine if you're in a higher band. These councils continue to plead poverty, and yet we still find ways they're wasting money. So we're going to keep doing it. I mean, there was a story just the other day, if I may. Surrey Heath Borough Council, former Chief Executive Karen Whelan, she was given, I think the word they used was unauthorised and unprecedented pay rise of £46,000. She billed the taxpayer for 2 stays at luxury 5-star hotels, one in Manchester, one in London. And thankfully the report has come out and she's resigned. But this is how some councils are spending our money, and it's simply not on. So we're going to be banging that gong, making the case for lower taxes, making the case for cutting wasteful spending. HS2 is just the tip of the iceberg on that. But yeah, we just keep doing what we're doing, and every week, every month, we're seeing more people are hearing about what we do. I mean, we've only been going 16 years, which sounds like a lot, but compared to some other think tanks, it's not. So the message is getting out there. More people are finding out about what we do, but we rely also on our supporters. We like tell us what's going on in your area. We'll help you, unearth the figures. We'll help you with Freedom of Information Request. We'll come and campaign. So yeah, we'll just more of the same basically.
Fantastic. So lots about tax there, but beyond tax, what do you think are the big issues or challenges facing our country?
I think coronavirus is sort of maybe deciding that for us a little bit. But I think deficit and the debt have always been 2 things that I've kept a very close eye on. I mean, it looks like we're going to have spending this year could well be in excess of 1 trillion, which is that's crazy. I mean, the national debt is around about 2 trillion, and that's before you get into all the unfunded liabilities. And I think a real worry that's with the economy in the perilous situation it is at the moment is we could be looking at stagflation, erosion of the currency, Possibly, if the government, I really hope the government doesn't go down the line of let's, raise taxes. There's been a suggestion of wealth taxes and things like that. Then, of course, you've got Brexit all in the midst of this, which remember that, where's that gone in all of this? So, and I say it's completely sort of thrown our plans sort of out the window. I'm really missing the grassroots campaigning, but the government has got to arrest this crisis. And if they, I think the latest figure is about 3 billion has been spent on, or 300 billion will be spent on coronavirus. They've got to work out how to find that money to balance the books. And if they don't, this could go on and on and on. And I think you said in the start there, we've got to do things that encourage entrepreneurship, encourage businesses, that leads to job creation. But let's see what happens.
No, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Thanks, Harry, for that. It's really good to hear your views there. Dan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. So, Mike, as you say, everybody's still in lockdown at the moment. What have we got available to keep people busy?
Well, you can read more of my conversation with Sputnik Radio, article and audios up on the website. We've had a fantastic interview with Tam Laird, the leader of the Scottish Libertarian Party. Now, Harry was part of the UK Libertarian Party, which is a separate organisation. Scottish Libertarian Party, slightly different, believes both in Scottish independence and Brexit. Among other things. Very interesting interview. Talks a bit about his background, how the fight for libertarianism and just general liberty and freedom is going on in Scotland, and some of the challenges they particularly face from the SNP running the country, and they are very much not the SNP. You should be clear about that. Have a read of that article. We also on Thursday have our virtual drinks. So Thursday the 30th of April between 7:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. we'll be on a go-to meeting. Have a look at our website for the URL. Look forward to seeing you. Pop in, drop in, bring your own drinks and have a chat with us. And last week was, of course, St. George's Day. We've got a leaflet up on our website, just some details about St. George. Might be of interest for those to have a little read and know a little bit more about our patron saint.
Yeah, definitely some interesting articles up there on our website, and in particular, I must say the interview with Tam Laird is insightful into some of the issues facing Scotland. Whatever you think of the SNP and whatever side of the fence you're on, it's refreshing to get a different viewpoint, certainly. Well, if you'd like to write for the website or you have any stories you'd like us to cover, do please get in contact. You can contact us on the Twitter at Croydon Const, via Facebook, via our website, croydonconstitutionalist.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalist@gmail.com. Well, as Mike mentioned there, we've got our latest virtual drinks coming up on Thursday the 30th of April from 7:30 p.m. The link will be in emails that go out and indeed on our website. So if you want to come along to that, or if you want to do anything with us, you can please just do get in touch. Or if you just fancy a chat at the moment, then that will be awesome. We're certainly available to discuss anything. So would like to thank Harry in particular for coming along and joining us on the podcast today. Thank you very much, and good luck with everything that's going on with the Taxpayers Alliance.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And finally, thank you to everybody for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Stay safe, everybody.